Hi there, I'm Karen Dunn of KMD Productions. From the equipment manufacturers to the engineers to the business people behind the scenes. Over the years, every member of the pro audio corner of the music industry have become family to me, and it's my job to bring the whole eclectic crew together. Each episode, I'll introduce you to one of these characters and open a window into my world of creating community in pro audio. Thanks for tuning in to One and Done. Today on One and Done, I'm talking to Ken Pooch Van Druten, a front of house engineer who has worked with everyone from Iron Maiden to Jay-Z to Justin Bieber. We've talked and you've been on some panels with me about being in the pandemic. So I want to approach this two ways, just the pandemic and post-pandemic. There are a lot of people, and as you know, Tour Sound is especially hard hit. Like, I thought I was in a bad position, but then hanging out with all you guys, I realized I will start working before you guys do, and I could do virtual events. So I think in the turmoil panel, you talked about other creative outlets that you've been using, like painting, right? So tell me a little bit about how you have like the whole mental health aspect. How do you keep positive and keep going during this time? And how do you try to balance your life?
Man, it's the hardest thing that this has exposed, in that, especially for me, my job is like, it's wrapped up in my life. It's not just my job.
Right.
There's so many people that, go to do a 9-to-5 job and come home at night, and then they have other lives and, whatever. And what I discovered through this pandemic was just how intertwined my entire life was in being a front of house live sound engineer. And when that's taken away, the mental aspect of like trying to do, okay, what now, right? What do I do now? And how creative it is. I don't know that people realize, you think of a musician having, talent and having creative ability to write songs and, all those kind of things. But I don't think people think about the people that are behind the scenes and how creative it is at what they do. And so, yeah, it's a tough thing, right? So what I had to do was, the first couple of months of the pandemic was really just me, like, sitting in my own poop going, oh, this sucks, what am I going to do? And then pretty quickly I realized I have to do something for my own mental state. And so that includes any sort of creative aspects, and for me, I started taking on some recording projects and also some mixing projects. And so it kept me in the audio land,
right,
but not doing live audio, but still creative enough to keep me going. And then all the rest of it. I did Pooch and Rabold and some Wrong End of the Snake, and all of those things selfishly were to keep my mind active and in the game. I am proud of what we've done and shared with our community, our sound community. But truth be told, I did it for me. I needed that in order to make it through. And so now later on, here we are a year and a half later, and that's shifted to try to, I'm still doing those things, Rabold and I are doing some other projects, and Wrong End of the Snake is on this little hiatus right now because we're trying to take a break. But I don't know what do I need to do for the next 4 months or whatever until I really start getting some jobs. But the good news is that it appears that stuff is coming back. So hopefully, I keep seeing on social media some guys doing one-offs. And
sure, yeah, I see that a lot too.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a long answer for, basically trying any way to remain creative. You have to. You can't just sit there. You can't just, you can only work on your house so long, right? Like you can only do chores around the house that needed to be done for years for so long. There's a creative part of this that you have to do for a mental aspect.
Right. What is your recommendation? Because this could go on for a while longer, right? So what is your recommendation for other guys, and primarily live sound, but not just live sound? There's a lot of pro audio guys also who are not working, or, everything's really limited. So what's your recommendation?
I think that, it's what I've been saying all along, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but I think it's true. There are so many outlets online to learn about new things and to just to expand your knowledge about your craft. And then the other thing is that I don't think a lot of people are taking advantage of. There are these companies, local sound companies that are, they're devastated just as we are. But what they do have is a bunch of gear hanging out. And so I am hearing about some people taking advantage of that. But if I were a guy that didn't own my own gear, and luckily I do, I would be calling up, my local company and saying, hey, do you mind if I come down and mess around on this console, whatever day, I'll stay out of your way, do it nicely. But I would be venture to guess that all of these companies would be willing to let you use their gear. It's not doing anything.
Right.
So why not take that opportunity to, take virtual playback stuff and hone your craft? My hope is that when this is over, that shows will be better, and be better because people spent the time learning during this pandemic, but also spent the time like honing their show files by spending some time with virtual playback, etc. So I'm looking forward to going to a festival, maybe sometime this summer, where all of a sudden all 7 bands on that bill just sound unbelievable, and I think it can happen. So that's my suggestion is, hone your craft while you have this time at home.
Okay. Let's talk about mental health and balance. And I know you guys, when you tour, it's like 24/7 for weeks and months and sometimes years. So how do you, or have you not, but maybe you've reflected on this time that you've been home, how do you try to balance work life with, whether it's healthy eating, some kind of exercise, some kind of balance along with all the music?
Balance is an F word for me. You know what I mean? It's like I, for years was not balanced, and my mental state of it, was poor because of it. As I've gotten older, I've realized that there has to be some sort of balance. You have to take time for yourself. And that has been a journey for me. I mean, I'm a recovering addict and an alcoholic, and I have been sober now for 13 years. And prior to that, though, it was go, 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 drink, 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 go, drink. And part of that was because I had no balance and had no insight into what I need mental health wise, on top of what's happening with my job.
Right.
So I do take the time now when I'm on the road to relax and to, I enjoy reading books now, which I never did before.
What kind of books?
It's funny. I love kind of self-help, how to get better at things. And also I like books about like audio, learning how to be better at audio. And stories of, like George Martin's book and producers that, hugely known producers and what their life's work was. I enjoy that as well. So before, I'll just give you an example of before. Before was day off, drink, watch TV, drink some more, maybe fall asleep at 5 o'clock at night. So now a day off for me is go to my hotel room, get away from everybody else, get centered, get quiet, and, listen to what is going on in my own crazy head.
Uh-huh.
And try to deal with those kind of things. Like if it's been a particularly rough week and I've, had some issues with my job or issues with what's going on at home, try to deal with those things. Like I never confronted those things in myself. And so now I'm way more in tune with what's going on with me, physically and mentally. And I can see when I am not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to, do things. I call friends and, I go to meetings and, that kind of stuff to try to deal with all of the stuff that's going on mentally that was in the past causing me to do stupid things like drink and, use drugs. So I'm much more in tune with myself now. And I think you have to be, in order to be on the road, you have to also take time away from yourself. I love everybody that I tour with, but I also need time by myself on those off days to, you know what I mean?
Oh, I definitely understand. Yeah.
To take time and concentrate on myself. So yeah, I think it's way more about what you said, just balance and focusing on yourself and really seeing the signs of like, oh, I'm traveling down this path that is really negative energy. So yeah.
Okay. So I've always called you Pooch. I met you as Pooch. I never call anybody by their nicknames ever. I never do. Like Chris Rodriguez, C-Rod. Would I ever call him C-Rod? No.
That's funny.
Mixed by Ali. Do I ever call him any of that? No, I call him Derek. His name is Derek Ali. But for you, I've always called you Pooch. I don't know why. And I don't know why you're called Pooch. So is it because you love dogs or what is the story?
No, it has nothing to do with dogs, although I am a avid dog lover, as you know. No, I got my nickname actually came from Vince Neil from Motley Crue. He started calling me, or actually Nikki Sixx, when I was working for Motley Crue, started calling me Big Dog because of my size.
Uh-huh.
I was probably, I don't know. I think I was 100 pounds heavier than I am right now when I was working for them. Like I was a big guy in the 400s. And so he would call me Big Dog.
Uh-huh.
And that kind of just like Vince Neil took that and turned it into Pooch. And then there was another production manager that hung on to that and started calling me that. And then there was this weird moment. And then I got right after Motley Crue, I started working for Whitney Houston, and she just loved that nickname. Like I was her monitor engineer, and she would go, Pooch, can you come up here? Can you turn this up or turn this down? And so I spent another 3 years of her calling me Pooch. So everybody around me called me Pooch. And then there was this weird moment of some people knew me as Ken and some people knew me as Pooch, and they couldn't put it together that it was the same person. So for a long time, I kind of like was pushing against the nickname thing. I was like, no. And then eventually I just had to accept it because people weren't knowing that I was the same person. And I was actually losing gigs because people would say, oh no, Pooch should have that job. And don't give it to that Ken guy. We're the same people.
That's really funny.
So yeah, that's where it came from.
Okay. So let's talk about your dogs, Sadie and Benton.
Yes.
They have their own Instagram account.
They do. Yes.
And you FaceTime with them when you're traveling.
I do. Although they are not very good at FaceTime. They kind of, they hear my voice and they'll look over there, and my wife's like, no, he's right here. No, but yeah, I mean, I've always been a dog lover. I've had dogs since I was a kid. And these two knuckleheads that I have right now are the best.
How do you leave them? When I leave Scout, I'm going to just be so sad. It's like having a kid.
It is. I don't know how that's going to go this next time because I've been home for so long. We just went and took a small little trip for 3 days. And I was like, I want to go back home and see my dogs. But in the past, it's tough, but you just do it, and you try to live vicariously through my wife. I live vicariously through my wife and say, well, what did they do today? And she'll have some story about what they did. But it's going to be tough. I know that is going to be particularly tough. And I know people that have, sons and daughters, which I don't. That's going to be even tougher going back to work because now they've been home for a year and a half. The kid is just going to be like, what? You're leaving? So, my dogs will be the same.
Yeah. So I know you started as a studio engineer.
Yep.
So how did you go from being in the studio to doing live sound?
I had never done any sort of live sound at all. Even in my teenage years and being a player, I had never been a live sound engineer. I went to Berklee College of Music, and then I started working at a studio there in Boston, did a bunch of records, and then moved to Los Angeles, started as a recording engineer and producer in 1990. So there was still, there wasn't home studios yet. There still was the art of producing and engineering, and was having a great old time. My career was going fine. I was digging it. And then I worked for this heavy metal band called Warrant. And I was doing some demos for one of their really big records. And the lead singer said, hey, we just fired our front of house engineer. Do you want to come mix us live? And I was like, well, I've never done that, And he's like, it doesn't matter. You should, come down and mix our show. And I was like, okay. And 2 days later, I found myself at the LA Forum.
Wow.
Mixing. They were opening, Warrant was opening for Rat at the LA Forum. And I found myself in front of a live sound console, which was completely foreign, and mixing this band live. And I immediately fell in love with the instant gratification of 10,000 people screaming for something that you're doing. Right.
But didn't that scare you to death? I mean, it's not even like you started off at some little club.
It did and it didn't. For some reason, I felt pretty confident about it. I was like, oh, well, I'll just, go out here and mix it. It's just like mixing a record, which it wasn't at all. Like now is way more, way more like mixing a record. The speaker technology is so good that, it sounds like a record. But back then it was like we were high-fiving when you could hear the vocal, it was like, hey, heard the vocal. It was great. And so it was very foreign, but for some reason it didn't scare me. I was like, I'm just going to go for it. I mean, what's the worst thing is like they don't like what I do live and we go back to the studio. I mean, that was kind of what I felt like, but I caught the bug. I immediately went, holy crap, this is amazing. People screaming for something that I'm doing. I want this instead of being locked up in a studio with no windows for, 16 hours a day. And so from there, it just went. I was like, this is what I want to do.
You have a really eclectic clientele list.
I do.
Justin Bieber, Jay-Z, Whitney Houston, Linkin Park, Kiss, Iron Maiden. How did you get such a diverse clientele? How did that happen?
How did that happen? I'll tell you, it happened mainly because of a mentor that I had. His name was ML ProSize.
Oh, I love ML.
Yeah, he was. He's no longer with us, God rest his soul. But I became like his cleanup guy. So whenever there was a client that the sound company was struggling with, at the time he was working for Shoko and then Claire Brothers, I was like his, go-to. Oh, this client, they're having trouble with this client. Send Pooch. And because of that, I ended up doing all these different styles and different genres of music. And once you do that once you do like a metal band and you go from Motley Crue to Whitney Houston and pull that off, then people see that you can, oh, well, this guy can do different genres, so we're going to send him to do whatever. I think it sucks that people get pigeonholed into a specific type of music.
Yeah.
But for me, it was, I love all music. And so I was really good about studying whatever the music was that I was going to go do, like learning what that music style should sound like, you know? So for instance, you go do Jay-Z. Jay-Z has lots of sub information. It's hip hop. It's got, you know, slamming drums. And then you go do Kiss, which is all about guitars and vocals, you know? And if you study those two different styles and give them that, then, you know, you can end up with an eclectic resume. But the short answer is really, it was not anything of my doing. It was literally, I was the guy who was like, oh, something sucks, send Pooch.
Okay, I have a question I've always wondered. I've only asked one person. I'm sure you've worked with people in the studio or live that you don't like their music.
Yes.
So how do you navigate that?
You know what's so funny is that I almost do a better job when I don't like their music. I'm not emotionally wrapped up in how it should sound. It's more of executing at that point. It's like, oh, I don't like this music, but I understand it. And I know, I listen to the record and say, okay, I can make this happen in live sound. I can make it sound like the record in live sound. That's what people want. Finding the essence of what it is that people enjoy about that music. And so it's kind of like analyzing it more than having emotional reaction to it. Okay. When I do a band like Iron Maiden, which is a band that I grew up with and was a fan when I was, 15 years old, I get wrapped up into the emotional side of it sometimes and maybe make mixed decisions that are based on a feeling of being 15 years old and in my room listening to this, you know what I mean? Whereas another band that I don't really care for their music, I don't have that. So then it almost is sometimes that I can get better. I can be a better mixer for bands that I don't like.
So you're more analytical and it's not so much emotional. It's more.
Yeah. Now, listen, I love Iron Maiden, and there are moments when I'm mixing them where I'm like, holy crap, I am 15 years old in my room with the record player turned all the way up. It has that emotional impact. And I think there are moments that, because of that, I also create something that super big fans will enjoy.
Sure.
Like little tiny nuances and moments that if you weren't a fan, you wouldn't know that there's this little guitar part, that's right there. And so I'm a big fan. So I'm like, I overemphasize that little guitar part, and big fans of that band appreciate that. They're like, oh man, yeah, that's the best guitar part, in that one little section. So there's pros and cons to liking or not liking the artist that I work for. But it's a really great question. And I certainly have worked for bands that I'm not a fan of and had success. So.
Okay. So I talked to students before I started this whole podcast thing, asking them what they would like people to answer. And a lot of them want to know like how you failed. And it's interesting with the Waves events. That's like always the most popular part. If one of you talk about some huge failure you had, but you still were able to move forward. So I want to know what your worst live sound experience has been.
Oh man, I have had thousands of failures. You know what I mean? It's like, I think people are surprised to hear me say that, they, someone that has gotten to the level that I have, I've still survived even after some major failures. I in the studio, I did a record with a band called Everclear, And they had all kinds of different multi-tracks running at the same time. And the way we used to do it back then was, sync the two multi-tracks together by using a SMPTE time code. And I armed the SMPTE track and erased a whole section of SMPTE out of one of the multi-tracks. That was like, I don't think it was drums, but I think it was guitars or something, So now no longer synced with everything else. So those are things that I've done in the studio that were absolutely horrendous. I have a million of those stories. For live sound, there was a console made by Avid called an Avid Profile, and it has a giant red button that when you engage it, it blinks a giant red light. And the reason that it does that is because when you push that button, it unsafes the ability to instantiate plugins in the console. And when you instantiate a plugin in a profile console, it takes up to 30 seconds of silence while it instantiates that plugin. And so you would never want to do that in a show, right?
Right.
And that's why there's a safe button. You push the button, it blinks red, and it says, "Don't do this, don't do this." Well, guess what? I did. At a show in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena with Linkin Park, packed to the gills, sold 270, so 15,000 people. I pushed the safe button and instantiated a plugin, and it was the longest 30 seconds of my life. It was like, it felt like an eternity. And it felt like all 15,000 people went and looked and stared at me and went, "What is happening?" And I know that wasn't what was happening, but it was also in that 30 seconds towards the end of it, there were people like going, "What?" And the worst part about it was I didn't really realize what I had done. It was early on when the console first came out. It was like 2007. And I didn't know that I had done that. I was like, I thought something else had broken, another piece of gear. But as it turns out, it was me that made it do it. And the down sucked, right? Like silence. Right. Everybody go, "What?" But the up was instant on 102 dBA weighted. I mean, it was like you could physically watch 15,000 people just go in their seats because it went from silence to completely loud. And so that was that was probably the worst thing that I've ever done. I got drug into the dressing room afterwards and had to explain what I did. And luckily I was working for a band that was, I just said, "Hey, listen, it won't happen again. I'm sorry. I made a mistake, and people make mistakes, and I did." And, some bands would have maybe fired me on the spot, but they didn't. Yeah. Now, if I had done it again, I would have expected to get fired.
Right.
So, yeah, listen, that's one of 100 stories I could tell you of mistakes, but that was probably the worst. Yeah. just because it was a music capital show, Nashville, LA, New York. If it happens at one of those shows, then you're like, "Oh my God, this is gonna be in the paper tomorrow." But anyway.
So, well, tell me one of the shows that you're most proud of.
Geez. I would say one of the most memorable that it was just one of those moments was a Guns N' Roses show at Rock in Rio. And, Axl was notorious for showing up late. And so the energy, it was 300,000 people. The last person in the back couldn't physically see the stage. Like they were watching the show on video screens. They couldn't see the stage. That's how far away they were. So it was 300,000 people just, and the energy of 300,000 people. And then a guy, Axl Rose, who doesn't show up. He was supposed to be there at 9 and got there at midnight.
Oh.
There was 3 hours of 300,000 people getting mad that the guy wasn't there. And so there was this pent up energy. People were throwing stuff in front of house. It was like we were about to have a riot. And then, the first song was like Welcome to the Jungle, and there's this guitar part, and it was like this release of 300,000 people losing their minds, and 300,000 people jumping up and down was making the earth move. Like we were in a house, and you could physically feel the earth moving. And so just telling you the story gives me goosebumps on my arms. Just that moment in time was something unbelievable. I'll always remember that.
I don't know if I'd want to be in a place that's 300,000 people jumping up and down.
We were like, I seriously was like, if he doesn't show up in the next half an hour, like at midnight, I was like, if he doesn't show up in the next half an hour, I'm tucking my laminate and running. I'm getting out of here because this is going to turn really bad.
Yeah.
But luckily, but I don't know this, but I think that was part of his deal. Why he would show up late is because he liked that energy of the initial rush of people that were mad at him and now ecstatic that he was there, and he did it all the time. So I think that's definitely what he was doing.
Now, is there an artist that you would love to work with and you haven't yet?
Oh, that's a great question. There are artists that are no longer around that I would have liked to work for. But yeah, I mean, Phil Collins, I was a super big fan of. I hear he's doing some Genesis stuff coming up. Like, I would love to do that. That would be something. Any sort of version of Pink Floyd, I would have loved to work for, whether it's Roger Waters or David Gilmour. Any of those versions, I'd love to be a part of. But all these legacy acts are all, they're all acts that I'd love to work for. They're all kind of deciding they don't want to tour anymore. We'll see what happens after the pandemic starts.
Yeah.
I mean, even my guys, the guys I'm working for right now are, in their late 60s. I don't know how much longer our Maiden's going to go. We'll see.
You got to get one more tour in.
Oh, they will for sure. And they'll, you know what? It's funny. Steve Harris, the bass player, is 65, I think, or 64, and is in better shape than I ever have been in my life. That guy will tour until he's 90. So there's going to be some version of Iron Maiden for years to come, for sure.
Now, with all your touring, you've been able to go all around the world.
Yep.
Where's your favorite place?
Oh, that's a great question. I have so many favorite places for different reasons. But I like Prague a lot as a favorite of one of my cities. I don't love working in South America, but I love the off days and the passion that the fans have in South America. Like, rock fans in South America are rabid. They love their bands.
Yeah.
And that is something pretty cool. And I love to be in, Argentina and Brazil and, those kind of places. Working there is tough because of the infrastructure.
Right.
But the people are so passionate and so awesome. I think where else? I love Austria. Believe it or not. There's a bunch of cities in Austria and the Swiss border in Austria that, all those Alps, Italian Alps too, all that is beautiful. And I would love to retire there.
Move out of Texas?
I mean, yeah, I'm here because my wife has an extended family. When we get together, there's 30 of us,
Wow.
to have a barbecue on Sunday. Like Mother's Day coming up, there's going to be upwards of 30, like 25.
Wow.
We've all been vaccinated. Everybody calm down. Nobody have a meltdown right now. But anyway, that's why I'm here in Texas. I think eventually, if I ever get to retire, I'll probably move away from Texas.
Okay, we don't have to go into why.
No, I mean, I just, listen, I grew up in Northern California. I grew up right where you are.
Yeah.
And I miss, there are some things I miss about that. The mountains. I spent weekends in Lake Tahoe. So my whole childhood was spent around mountains and lakes and trees and, those kind of things. And here in Texas, there isn't that. It's flat.
Yeah. It's really flat.
Yeah. So I would love to live someplace like that. I just can't afford to live in NorCal right now. Walnut Creek is
nobody
ridiculous.
Can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So last question. So, this community is really important to me, and I do things to try to keep connected to people. And when things are regular, you and I travel a lot. So I started this thing. I found out that we both eat yogurt in the airports, and I would take pictures of my yogurt I'm eating and tag you to find out where you are and what you're doing, because I wouldn't know. And that was just one way for me just to stay connected to you. And what I'm trying to find out is, what does community mean to you?
Interesting. It means everything. And I think that, I've been talking to Chris Rabold about this, how going back, I think we've built this kind of community in our YouTube channel that I think will extend into the real world. Like, I think that I'm going to be at shows and there are going to be people that come up and say, "Hey, I saw you on your YouTube thing." And it's my job to embrace those people and listen to any questions that they have and share any knowledge that I have to continue the discussion, but now in person. We've spent a year of us talking to each other, Chris and I, on the the YouTube channel, but to have the ability to now interact with people in person in regards to what we've discussed, over the 50 hours of content that we've put out there that people might have questions about or want to talk to us about. I think that have hopefully struck a chord enough to where we can have those in-person discussions about that and continue in community about that. So I'm looking forward to that, to seeing people in person and discussing about some of the things that we, built in this year.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. I actually have one more question. For students or people trying to get into tour sound industry now, what is your best tip for them on making their way into the industry?
Boy, this is the hardest question that I get all the time. I told you earlier how I got in this industry, which is a really unconventional way. I happened to be in the right place at the right time and took the opportunity and went for it. I think there is still traditional avenues to get in this industry, like, going to a Claire Brothers or, a Sound Image and trying to start a job there by sweeping the floor and then getting an opportunity to make cable and then getting an opportunity maybe to go on tour as a PA guy. I think that exists. That avenue, the traditional avenue exists. That is one way. But I also know that because speaker technology and technology in general has merged so closely with studio stuff, there are a lot of opportunities for studio guys to now cross over into being live sound guys, and vice versa. Like, the line is really super blurred there right now. And so if you're working with a band in the studio, I encourage you to take the opportunity to mix them live, and learn about what that is. So I don't know. Those are the two ways. What I always tell people is the old adage of being in the right place at the right time is true. It exists, definitely. But putting yourself in the right place at the right time is an art. And so figuring out where to place yourself to where you're standing next to the guy that gets fired. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a strategic part of that, like putting yourself in the right place at the right time is strategy. So I, for myself, took every opportunity as a yes. I never said no to anything. And I always headed myself towards, even if I was just the patch guy out on a tour, I knew it was going to place me in a possible opportunity to mix an opening act or to mix, with maybe the monitor engineer gets fired and you're the guy standing there and you get the job,
Right.
So putting yourself in the right place at the right time, I think is the biggest thing that you can do to help your career.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One and Done. Don't forget to check out today's show notes and our YouTube channel for more from our guests, and subscribe to our KMD Pro weekly resource guide on kmdpro.com. This podcast is produced by Jules Everson and Stephanie Lamont. Our audio engineer is Corey Klotz. We'll see you next time.